What's good, YouTube? With the very present ishizu engine going around, I decided to bring you my Shaddoll Invoked deck as they have a good matchup against the ishizus. With that being said, I'll go through the deck list. So we got one frame driver for the frame gear gamma. We got one effect veiler for the effect negation, and it's also a light, so it helps with getting into construct. We have three maxis because the best hand trap when it comes to any deck that special summons. Two frame gear gammas. So I specifically run gamma for it being a light, and it also helps with protecting going into Shaddoll fusion, because if the Shaddoll fusion gets ashed or negated by Barone or anything else, frame gear gamma helps Shaddoll fusion resolve. One Shaddoll Hedgehog. I just needed more unique names because when you start milling a lot of the Shaddoll cards, you can only activate their effects once per turn, so this is just a good card to just recur your hand and being another decent effect. Also, the flip effect is not bad to resolve, but something I'll have noted is like a lot of the Shaddoll cards, they don't have their flip effects resolved throughout the games because they're far too slow with their flip effects. One Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. This is just very decent in the meta right now with the sprites and the runic decks that are running around. Three Ash Blossoms, just a generic hand trap that pretty much deals with a lot. Two Shaddoll Wendy's, one of the better Shaddoll cards, always can resolve by special summoning a Shaddoll monster from the deck. Usually I target with Beast, but depending on the scenario of the field, you can go into any of the other Shaddolls. Also helps well with going to Apgalone. Three Squamatas because I find it to be the best card to just fill up your grave, because let's say the Ishizu cards don't mill this card or anything that gets your Shaddolls into the grave that you need, you can have Squamata get it there. Two Shaddoll Dragons. I actually run two now instead of one because I was running one, and because there's a lot of back row I've been noticing lately, so it just helps just not lose to like back row heavy decks. Three Alistair the Invokers because we have the Invoked engine, so just a great card, still a good normal summon to have. One Shaddoll Ariel because it's good when it gets milled off the Ishizu cards because it forces them to activate their Ishizu cards that shuffle cards into the deck. For those who do not know, it's when this card is sent to the graveyard, you can target three cards in any graveyard and banish them. So usually you're targeting the Ishizu cards, or if you're playing against like Adamantimators who run the Ishizu cards, you can mill their, and with their crazy luck that they have, always hitting their block dragon into their grave. So you can have the Ariel target that, and that will force them to shuffle the block dragon back into their deck. Two Shaddoll Beast. I find it to be a good card that's targeted off of Wendy, or if you just need to draw cards because like you need to fix your hand or something, this is just a good card for that. One Harpy's Feather Duster for the back row heavy decks. Three Shaddoll Fusions, the best card for the Shaddoll to get into any of the Shaddoll fusions. Two Invocations, this is for the Alistair. Don't run three because three is just too much and you can brick on them. Two Magical Meltdown. I know this recently came back to three, but I still run two because it's another card you just don't want to see too many in your hand because it can just end up being dead. Two Super Polymerizations. Still a good card in this deck. I don't find it to be as helpful as like in the Despia decks because you can fit in like board breaking fusion monsters, like the ones for Sprite or just like any of the other generic ones. I only really run the Starving Venom to break boards, but the Shaddolls are pretty good with getting into the other attributes because we have like for Window would be Dark, and then Alistair as well works with the attributes with Wind, Light, Fire, and such. One El Shaddoll Fusion. We run one only because we just want more ways to fusion within our deck. Two Call by the Grave, just a generic good card to stop with hand traps. One Forbidden Droplet because it's really good to resolve off of Shaddoll Fusion or any of your other spell cards that help with fusion summoning. So it can just help clear the board with that. Shaddoll Schism, best Shaddoll card as well. This is usually to resolve off of your opponent's turn. If you're going first, you kind of want to aim for setting this up on your board. So for that reason, we run one. Uh, so going into the extra deck, we have two El Shaddoll Windows, still just a good card. Unfortunately, I noticed that it can be added a lot more, so this deck does need to have a little more setup. Like you can't just rely on Window to win you a game anymore. But in a simplified game state that I kind of have going on with all the other cards, it's pretty easy to get into that. Uh, the Rajin, because occasionally you still see wins, like Barone is still all over the place, so it helps with the super poly when you have Alistair, or just any other generic things. It can come up occasionally. Two Alp Cologne, still one of the better Shaddoll fusion cards. This is what helps you get into the Schism. Or if like something is like you need one of the Shaddoll's effects right away to draw or to pop a spell or trap or to even banish cards, this is like the best way to get into those cards. The Purgatrio, this is good off of Alistair the Invoker. This is good because usually, like, I find it to be helpful in the Sprite matchup because these usually have like a lot of little bodies on board, and this card can just attack all those monsters once each, and it does piercing, and usually it gets pretty big, especially when you buff it with Alistair itself. And you can OTK. I definitely had games where that came up. Two Shaddoll Construct. This is another good card to start off with. This is what helps you get into Shaddoll Schism because you'll send that to the grave, and then you can go into the Gravity Controller. And we don't really use it for the other effect of like destroying monsters that are special summon, but again, in simplified game states, that does come up. And also, the reason I run two is because sometimes if you're like in a light matchup, like your opponent's running a lot of light monsters, you can resolve a Schism with it. So it helps. One Starving Venom Fusion Dragon. This is for the Super Poly. One of this guy, I cannot pronounce him, but he does come up occasionally in like simplified game states as well, where you have the Alistair in grave or wherever you have him, and you just need to pop something, and you have the invocation. So again, another card that does come up. I've only had it resolved once recently with the once per turn you can banish one fusion monster from the graveyard. This card gains attack equal to that banished monsters. And that does help as well with the OTKing or getting over big monsters. That actually came up against the Ignition deck where they had the huge boss monster, the tower, that's like 6,000 attack. Two Invoke Mechaba, still one of the better invoked cards. Usually what you want to go into turn 1 with Alistair, going to Artemis, and then you fusion summon into that. Shaddoll, probably not going to be able to pronounce that either. It's the Earth Fusion Shaddoll card. I run this specifically because we run into a lot of Earth monsters now thanks to the Ishizus, and it helps with the Super Poly, or with your Maxi as well can work out. Still just a good card. Pretty beefy with the 3,000 defense. So I still find it to be like I definitely summoned this before, so that's the reason why I definitely kept it. Gravity Controller specifically to get your fusion monsters like App Cologne or Construct into the grave. And then Artemis, this is just simply to get into turn 1 Mechaba because you would send the Alistair the Invoker for this. So that's it for my deck list. Now on to the replays. Alright, so here we are with the deck replays. Let's look at the confirmed opponent's deck. And our first match that I'm going to show for the replay is going to be against Adamantipator's ishizu. Let's go into the replay. Alright, so I drew 2 hand traps. I was the one to go first though. So I was trying to go into Construct. They had the Ash. So unfortunately this was kind of the problem with the Shaddoll deck, or with Shaddoll Fusion specifically, is like they can be stopped pretty easily if they have hand traps. But it's all fine. I set the Super Polymerization in case they have 2 Dark Monsters because I don't know what deck they were running. But here I find out they had the Ishizu cards, and this is what I'm talking about, where the Ishizu cards can really help fix this deck, because like even if you brick, they help you because all the Shaddoll monsters in the grave activate. So we were able to resolve Beast. We also milled a Dragon, but there was no spell and traps to pop. Unfortunately, we only drew into another monster, So it was looking a little rough, but then they mill another 5 cards, and this is what helps get our deck going, because now we can special summon Wendy. We were able to force out the shuffles with Ariel, so now this is going a little too fast. So yeah, I targeted right here. You can see with my Ariel, I targeted Black Dragon, the Shuffler, and the Guardian, just to have another random target. I don't remember my exact reason for doing Guardian, but again, that forces them to shuffle their own Black Dragon back into the deck, which is completely fine by me because without their Black Dragon, they can't really extend that much. Able to special summon, go for the Super Poly once they summon the Adamantipator, and this is why exactly the Earth Shaddoll monster is really good, because now we were able to negate their next monster effect, but they just passed the turn right there. And then I draw into Alistair the Invoker, and yeah, they just quit right there because he kind of saw the writing on the wall where I pretty much had like I still had my Ash and my Effect Veiler, so there was no way I was really losing. And I was going to fusion summon into another monster. My graveyard would stack. I could have special summoned off of his graveyard if he had any hand traps, so yeah, on to the next one. So looking at the second duel, we're going to confirm the opponent's deck. They were playing Sky Strikers, so we're going to look into that. Right, so they got to go first. Pot of Prosperity. Then I see that they're running Sky Strikers with the Adventure package. Go for the Mobilize. Activate Mobilize. Get the Ray. Now, I knew they were going to go for a double, and I couldn't negate it with Gamma, but I was just thinking he doesn't have 3 spells in the grave. That would be the only way, because they look a little desperate going for Mobilize, not knowing they have 3 spells. So I decided to hold on to my Gamma for this, in case they had an Ash and I couldn't resolve my fusion for next turn. So I was fine with letting them resolve everything. They go for that one that summons a Striker token, Mecha. I was a little confused here why they special summoned 2 monsters. Was not a usual play from the Sky Strikers, but then it made sense a little after when they summon Anaconda. So they also run the DPE package, and this is when I try to use the Gamma, but then they had the Ash, which is completely fine. Ash is so terrible to activate against Gamma because you still have it in your hand, and this is fine by me. Sets 3, he passes. And we have a pretty good hand right here because we could activate Shaddoll Fusion, special summon using materials from the deck, a good normal summon. They were like, I had the Gamma for using the Fusion. I don't believe I did something. Okay, he doesn't activate anything. Right, so he lets that resolve. I summon App Cologne to force out the activation from DPE because he's going to have to pop this or else his effects are going to be permanently negated. And I send Wendy and a Squamata because Squamata gets me into any other card, which is a perfect scenario because I can either go for something to pop the back row, or I can go for whatever they have in with Ariel and go for whatever they have in the graveyard. And then Wendy because, again, it's just I feel like it's always the best target to go with App Cologne because you're going to special something onto the field face down. So I do all my chains right here. Then, yeah, so he's forced to do the pop, which isn't bad either because App Cologne's effect now allows me to grab a card from my deck and then discard to activate another Shaddoll type of effect. So Squamata, use Ariel, special summon the Beast off of Wendy. Ariel, I target the spells because a lot of Sky Striker spells only get their bonus effect when they have 3 spells in the grave, and then I go for the DPE so they have nothing to resolve after that. Unfortunately, he had the Call by Grave, so that's not going to resolve with Ariel. Then I go for the Dragon to get rid of his back row. Unfortunately, I wasn't hitting anything good. Then I go for the Alistair. And then unfortunately, he has the Sky Striker Mecha Widow, which of course, I miss off my dragon off of that. But thankfully we had the super poly because that's what I'm going to go for. Fusion for a window using these two, but he already sees that I have the counter to that because I was going to get an invocation, fusion summon using his DPE, and that was pretty much game. Alright, for my third game, I'm going to show a game that I lost in, so I'm just going to confirm the opponent's deck. So, of course, it's Runic Sprite, probably the best deck in the game right now. I do lose because I believe I go second, and on top of that, they just drew really well. Right, so I'm going second. My hand was okay. Kind of unfortunate I drew two super polys, but I still have the gamma to at least get one good negate destroy. But then here I see that they're running Runic, which isn't really good. This is probably the most unfavorable matchup with Shaddolls because they banish instead of going to the grave, so none of their effects resolve. Yeah, to get my Skumata. Now they know I'm playing Shaddolls as well. And I just have nothing to stop this. This is why I run Ghost Ogre or the 3 Ashes, because I needed something to prevent this, but unfortunately he was going to chain block it anyway. I go for the Gamma just to cut him off at least a card short. Right, so then he activates more Runic cards, special summons, and then I see he's on the Sprite, which is very unfortunate because this is what I was mentioning on my deck list, where I have these super polys, and unlike my Despia build where I run board breaking targets for super poly, which would have been the Cyburst fusion card, I'm not able to do anything with this unless I have monsters on the board, so I'm going to have to set then super poly. So they're going to go through the whole Sprite combo. I don't really have anything to stop this. If I knew they were on Sprite beforehand, and this is the problem with best of ones, is you have absolutely no information what deck they're playing, I definitely would have saved my Gamma for either their Link or their XYZ. But because they also had the best sequence that they got to red first, so it probably wouldn't have mattered that much. Right, so if I had the target for Super Poly, this would have been great. I definitely would have been back in the game, but unfortunately I don't run that card. And then unfortunately I draw the Beast. That's why I understand why some people run only one Beast, because they think it's a brick when you draw into it, which is definitely true, because you can see right here, this is costing me a card that probably another card that could have helped me get out of the situation, like maybe like Forbidden Droplet. So right, I go for the field spell, try to get Invoker. If I'm able to get Invoker to resolve, I get Invocation. I get to Super Poly into one of their cards, and then I can use the Invocation to go into one of the Shaddoll fusions. Thankfully, he banishes something that's irrelevant to me. But he draws a +3 because this field spell is crazy. And that's unfortunate. I do believe he did search this out. He has the banish, but I'm still just going to try to go for something. Oh, but then he banishes my field spell. Don't recall why. Maybe he was afraid I had like Shaddoll Fusion that he couldn't negate. Either way, I go for the invocation to go into Winda. Try to go for the pop. I'm realizing now I probably should have done that first while he still had his Link monster on the field. That way he couldn't have protected the fountain. But now he's able to. Very unfortunate, he banishes my Schism. My Ash Blossom came a little too late. Yeah, then he's gonna destroy. He negated my Winda, so he's able to destroy, and then he's gonna spin back my Purgatory or Purgatrio, Purgatory, with the Nightmare Unicorn. Yeah, so I kind of let this play out only to see where he can go with this. Waiting for my next draw. Unfortunately, he had the Call by the Grave. Because definitely, if I was able to resolve that and he had nothing else, like let's say he had like Maxi or something, because sometimes like Maxi can kind of be a brick like that where you're not proactive with it; it's only a reactive card. If I was able to stop this, kept only those two cards that were hopefully dead, and I drew into Shaddoll Fusion, because I believe at this point as well, I have not milled it, not seen it. 22 cards left. There was a decent chance to draw into it, and that definitely would have got me back into the game. And that's what I was talking about, how like those Shaddoll Fusion cards can be very good in the simplified game state, especially off of Shaddoll Fusion. Like you get your resources back surprisingly, but I'm talking all hypothetical, as if he didn't just negate my Ash with the Call by the Grave. And I even called it the Max C. He just normal summons it, gets into his Sprite Blue. And at this point, I'm pretty sure I just let him play it out just to see if he can kill me, see what I can draw into. Yep, the Djinn Buster goes into all that. His battle phase is skipped. He has a spell negate. It didn't matter. I drew into my second beast, which is very on theme of why people were only running one beast, because yeah, stuff like this happens where you draw into the one beast or your two beast in my case, and you can't do nothing. So I don't believe he's able to kill me here. Yeah, I don't usually surrender early. I will usually wait till like my last draw. And yeah, the Harpy's Feather doesn't do anything for me. Oh, I end up letting him end my life points. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So yeah, you can see that Shaddoll isn't good against every matchup. Can be a little slow sometimes compared to something fast like Sprites. Uh, with the banishing, it doesn't help with that. But overall, I've definitely had a lot of success with the deck. I still find it to be very helpful. As you saw in the first match against the ishizu decks, it can be pretty good, and it like helps counter what people do with the Shizus, thinking like, oh man, I shouldn't mill their deck because they can ruin my plays or they can activate their effects. So yeah, definitely a great deck, and I hope to see you on the next one.